Good afternoon, this is Media Center Ukraine Odesa, and we continue with the human rights violations in the temporarily occupied territories. Our speakers are Vira Yastrebova, lawyer, director of the NGO Eastern Human Rights Group. Good afternoon, Vira, and Iryna Chaura, human rights activist. Good afternoon, Iryna. Let's start with children. I know that there is such information that in the occupied territories of Ukraine, there is the deepened medical filtration of children. And here we can have some negative perception. Is it really so that our Ukrainian children are prepared for transplantology? We can say that recently the Vice Speaker of the State Duma of the Russian Federation, Anna Kuznetsova, accused Ukraine of transplantology of children. However, we investigated this issue on the occupied territories of Ukraine. So what we found out, since last year, the occupiers have been conducting medical screening of children, spending huge amounts of money from the state budget of the Russian Federation for this process. The children are forcibly passported, and during this process, Russians change personal data of children. Last year, the occupiers changed the statistics of deported children. After our NGO, published the report about deported children. The occupiers immediately reduced the number of deported children by 100,000. So the question is why? Moreover, in addition to the changed data and citizenship of the Russian Federation, the children just get a medical certificate that states what organs are healthy and what are not in those children. And we should also recall the statements of some Kremlin propagandists who suggested the possibility of training Ukrainian children, in particular Anton Krasovsky. So we have the question, actually, why the Russian Federation has decided to invest in the medical filtration of children. As for the latest reports, I would like to say that the occupying authorities conduct in-depth medical filtration of children. In the temporarily occupied territories, 35 medical teams are involved that include about 1,000 doctors. And these are not just ordinary doctors. They are from the National Medical Research Center for Children Health of the Russian Federation. They conduct so-called medical examinations, including minors. There is only one conclusion. Accusing Ukraine of being involved in transplantology, the occupiers are simply playing for preemption by leaving behind indirect evidence of trade in children's organs. What is the evidence? The evidence is as follows: the change of children's personal data, medical screening of filtration, and also this is the decrease in numbers of children taken out after our NGO published information about the number of deported children. One more question about healthcare. I know that occupiers forced Ukrainians residing in the temporarily occupied territories to donate blood for the needs of the Russian military. Yes, there is the whole campaign that has been launched for forced donation of blood. Collaborators and also the members of different Kremlin movements and faked students of the faked universities that are now opened in the temporarily occupied territories. This procedure is carried out by signing, and if people refuse to donate blood, there is the pressure, intimidation with regard to such people. And also, what do you know? What do the trade unions do in the temporarily occupied territories? They are also involved in the organization of this forced blood collection. And I have also a question to Iryna. It is also related to children. And I know that they forced our Ukrainian children to join the so-called army units. Yes, we can see the increased military propaganda among Ukrainian children. These children are forcibly enrolled in the army units. And in all schools in the temporarily occupied Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions, this is according to the latest information that we have received, school children were given application forms to join the UNAMI, and they were forced to fill them out. And as for the military department of the Luhansk State University, named after that, has signed an agreement with UNARMY, and according to this agreement, the representatives of the so-called movement will teach students. It is also worth noting that the UNARMY openly declares that the main task of their so-called movement is to prepare children for the war. Since upon reaching the age of majority, the members of the UNARMY become they will in the line to be drafted into the Russian army. This is how it looks. Let's discuss labor issues. Do we know that there are huge problems with jobs, with the salaries that are too low? And as far as I know, now Ukrainians need to get a work permit. Yes, from the 1st January 2024, all Ukrainian citizens in the temporarily occupied territories will be required to get a so-called patent or work permit. Otherwise, the employer who employs the citizens of Ukraine is subject to Russian sanctions. This can be like the imposition of an administrative fine on citizens of Ukraine directly from 2,000 to 5,000 rubles for officials. So those people who employ citizens of Ukraine, from 25,000 to 50,000 rubles. Legal entities from 250,000 to 800,000 rubles. Or it could be an administrative suspension of the activity for up to 90 days. Thank you, Vira. Just a month ago, we discussed with you those fake elections in the temporarily occupied territories, and we could also see that back there was a kind of a filtering of local population, and they tried to find those people who still have Ukrainian passports. And as far as I know, there is kind of an intensification of such filtering measures. Yes, they are not only stopped, they have been intensified, and according to the latest information, the occupiers conducted kind of a raid in the occupied villages and small settlements. And so during the gathering of civilians, they were informed about taking fingerprints from local residents. What is the aim of the Russian Federation? First of all, this is the part of this force put on people to get Russian passports, because they say that the Ukrainians are foreigners. And just think of that, Ukrainians in their own land are called foreigners. And such intensified filtering measures get even worse. We can also say that the occupiers transfer additional detachments of the Russian Guard to carry out regular measures to check the local population and the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. During their large-scale raids, once every 2 months, they plan to set up additional checkpoints and increase the number of patrol groups in the Ukrainian settlements in the temporarily occupied territories. This means that the occupation authorities try to do everything possible to reveal pro-Ukrainian locals, and the Russian Federation is afraid of pro-Ukrainian locals. And such activities can be related to the preparations for the presidential elections of the Russian Federation in order to intimidate the local population. I also know that the occupation authorities try to issue as many Russian passports as possible to children, and as far as I understand, they put pressure on their parents. Nowadays, without Russian passports, it is impossible to get healthcare services, medication, or payments. Single mothers or fathers are blackmailed, so they're deprived of the possibility to get payments for their children. And the occupation authorities on the occupied territories of Ukraine cancel social benefits for childcare from children of 14 to 17 if they believe such children need to get Russian passports. This is made to make it impossible for such people who refuse to get Russian passports just to survive in the territory. So first, the occupation authorities cancel several services, and then there is the full cancellation of child care if there is a refusal to get Russian passports. What are the sanctions used for the Ukrainians who refuse to collaborate with the occupation authorities? Recently, in the State Duma of the Russian Federation, there has been introduced a draft law on the deprivation of Russian citizenships of residents of temporarily occupied territories. The amendments offered to Article 22 of the Federal Law on Citizenship of the Russian Federation. This law provides for the deprivation of Russian citizens of residents who refuse to cooperate with the occupiers and join the occupation army. Moreover, in the future, they plan to strictly control all cases of evasion of military registration. This threatens with the deprivation of any social benefits, because after refusing to join the occupation army, people will be deprived of the opportunity to receive health care, job, administrative services, and any payments. So people are deprived of any chance of adequate living in those occupied territories. And also, being in the occupied territories of Ukraine without Russian citizenship can lead to further deportation. As for the social and economic sphere, all the time we discuss this topic. In the media center, Ukraine, Odesa, we know that there are problems with the power and water supply. And Iryna has already mentioned that people without Russian passport cannot get any medication. So do drugstores have enough medication for people? The situation with the medication in catastrophic. It is not difficult, it is catastrophic. Those people who, because of their health statuses, have to be all the time on specific medication, cannot get these drugs. Elderly people coming to hospitals for insulin could not receive this drug if they do not have a passport of the Russian Federation. People are sent to get passport and medical insurance. And to get that medical insurance, they also need to receive some additional certificates. And only after that, these people can get access to the medication. So people without Russian passports are not needed there. So these people are doomed unless they get occupation passports. And also we can see the same situations in prisons. Those people who need the necessary therapy and those they were known in abusing drugs, are not allowed to get any assistance. We know that the occupiers they have a lot of losses in the front line, on the front line, and as far as I understand, the Russian Federation tries to make locals to join their army to fill in those losses. And we understand that this is forced mobilization. What is the situation there? Unfortunately, in the temporarily occupied territories, those mobilization activities continue. And we can see the following strategy. Those people who do not like the situation in the temporarily occupied territories that get summons to the front line for these people not to ask about their salary, about healthcare services, and how they can survive. And so we can see that the summons are issued in place of healthcare institutions, educational institutions, utility services. And I can say even more that we have recorded the fact of mobilization of students. The full-time students, though, were the students from the Donbas State Technical University in the temporarily occupied city of Alchevsk of the Luhansk region. Students were told that they need to go on leave and to join the army of Russia. And I would like to ask you a bit more about this forced issuing of passports. As far as I know, if people refuse to get Russian passports, they get some amount of dates for this person to get the passport, and if they fail to do this, there are sanctions and visions. Yes, there is the algorithm to deport Ukrainians who refuse to get Russian passports. The occupation authorities have envisaged a range of sanctions. If Ukrainian citizens under occupation did not receive a Russian passport, he must be registered within 90 days with a mandatory fingerprinting and photographing procedure. In the case of refusing to undergo the procedure, a Ukrainian citizen is subject to their so-called laws to administrative liability, which envisages from 2,000 rubles for individuals to 400,000 rubles for legal entities. If a legal entity hires a person with a Ukrainian passport. And I also have a question to Iryna. I know that the security forces of the occupation authorities conducted the operation called illegal to find people without Russian passports. Yes, the FSB, the Russian guard to the police, and the migration service of the occupiers conducted an operation aimed at identifying local residents in the temporarily occupied territories without Russian passports. 89 people were detained, including 31 citizens of Ukraine. 18 citizens face deportation. Currently, people are being held in migration prisons. Such actions of the occupation authorities are aimed at preventing local residents from working without Russian passports. Therefore, if someone works without a Russian passport, they are detained and subjected to administrative liability. This is fine, and these people can be deported in the long run. What about collective deportation? They envisage them for the next year. These are the plans of the occupation authorities. But I'm sure that the armed forces of Ukraine will prevent from these plans to become real. But we can cease to the migration prisons there. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the floor? Good afternoon, Pershemyskintevich. I have a question to you, Vira. Can you tell us, please, what do you expect? Will occupiers take Ukrainian children from Ukrainian families? If yes, then what is the reason and what is the future destiny for the children? Yes, you've already heard in our report that we see signs that the Russian Federation has been preparing our Ukrainian children for this dark transplantology of our children. Why do occupiers do that? To deprive Ukraine of its future, to put pressure on Ukraine by de facto kidnapping Ukrainian children from the territory of Ukraine. There is the whole range of reasons. There is the whole program developed, and they have already been implementing this program, headed by the vice speaker of their parliament, Anna Kuznetsova. And the procedure of kidnapping, the putting children under aggressive influence of propaganda, the militarization of these children, they want to fully use Ukrainian children. This is the objective of the Kremlin authority. And Ukraine is doing now everything possible to get back as many children as possible. But we understand that still our children, while our children are under occupation, they are under potential danger, unfortunately. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? And just would like to ask you about research in your headquarters in Lysychansk. Yes, you know, the FSB tried to deal not only to a peaceful population in the temporarily occupied territories. Their main strategic enemies is our organization, the Eastern Human Rights Group. They initiated research in our office in the Center of Human Rights, where we teach people and about the human rights advocacy campaigns. The criminal proceeding has been initiated against me and Lysychanski Pavlo, who is the founder of the Eastern Human Rights Group. And this cynism is astonishing. So they just put weapons to our office to discredit our organization. But this means that we are effective in human rights protection and in promoting the priority of human rights in Ukraine. For the FSB officers, the main enemies are human rights, democratic principles, and those people who protect them. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much for keeping record of the crimes of the Russian Federation against Ukrainians. This is the last briefing for today. When it comes to briefings in our media center.